You're listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next 30 minutes, we're going to be talking about the power of the Doctor, so you don't have to.
Thanks, John.
Hi, I'm Matt.
I'm John.
I'm JR.
And I'm Simon.
John's having
trouble.
technical problems with the vibrator that he's got in his desk drawer that just won't switch off. It's normally the only way he can keep on going through the podcast.
You've seen everything everywhere all at once. That's what's going on here.
Excellent. So John is muted when he's not speaking, and then he's going to try and unmute when he does speak, which could go dramatically wrong.
Probably the best thing to do is for the rest of us to have a conversation and for John to just nod when he agrees with stuff and shake his head when he disagrees.
That's very true. So we're talking about the great Chris Chibnall, who the best writer ever on television. John's nodding. That's fine. He's written the final Jodie Whittaker, and it's being transmitted in October. We know this is going to be a spoiler-filled podcast for Lee if Lee's watching.
Lee won't be watching
avoiding the trailers.
I should point out, I might mention things that aren't public knowledge that have been talked about. Not much, because I don't know much and I've not sought out much, but there are a couple of things that I've heard, just by having been in various forums or whatever. A couple of things I've seen that aren't generally reckoned to be public knowledge. And I don't see the point in not talking about them, because otherwise we're limiting ourselves too much, because this isn't a great deal that I've heard, and I don't know if it's true anyway, but I might as well bring it up. So there's a warning that this episode will be ever so slightly more spoilery than necessarily what you'll have seen in Doctor Who magazine.
Yes, whereas I've watched the trailer and I've barely read DWM, which is why JR's decided I'm going to host this and not him, but that's fine. So
I haven't read DWM at all, so
Have you not? John has.
Yes,
John?
No, just nod. Nod.
Yeah, you
just
nod. You don't need to say anything, John. Shut up, John. Just like, there we go. So I've watched the trailer. So this is the centenary special. The centenary being the centenary of the BBC. We know, here we go. JR's held up the DWM for viewers, because we are on YouTube as well as normal podcasts. We've all seen the trailer, which is the next time trailer at the end of Legend of the Sea Devils. We know that Ace is going to be in this. We know that Tegan's going to be in this. We know that Daleks are going to be in this. We know that Cybermen are going to be in this. We know that the human, creepy human Cyberman, whose name is
Ashard,
is going to be in it. We know that Jacob Anderson is going to be in it, and the usual companions. We assume that Bradley Walsh is going to be in it, but not who's in America making more money. So that's about all we know. So I was Matt.
But we were going to give the score to the name of the episode. We were going to give it a score.
Well, we're going to give a score of
because we like to score things, don't we?
Yeah, of what we imagine it's going to be.
No. We're going to score the title of the episode, just a score for what. Okay. Because as we like to score things, Simon obviously wasn't aware we were going to do this, but this was a plan that John and I hatched. So Simon's going to go first.
It's a bit like scoring a birthday present before you've unwrapped it, isn't it?
No. You're not scoring what you think the episode is going to be like. You're scoring the title. You're scoring what you think of the title.
It's a middling 5.
It's like scoring the wrapping paper.
It's a 5.
Okay, you don't want to expand on that.
A middling 5. It's it's reminiscent. It's echoes the past of the show. It infers a climactic, powerful thing. But I'm just that little bit dubious. So we shall see.
JR? He says hosting.
Well, there are two things about it, aren't there? One is it kind of harks back to Eve of the Daleks, because Eve of the Daleks was like a play on Evil of the Daleks. And so Chris Chibnall's harking back to one of his own episodes. And also it harks back to The Day of the Doctor, which was the anniversary special in which lots of elements from the past came back at the same time as elements from the sort of current period of Doctor Who were in it. So it was past and present meeting and mixing up together. So it harkens back to both of those things. But whereas The Day of the Doctor was a title that had a dual meaning, there was a meaning of what it meant within the story. This is The Day of the Doctor. And there was the meaning that was metatextual to the story, in that this is the anniversary of the Doctor as well. And so this day is the day of the anniversary of the Doctor. Insofar as we know, this story doesn't have that dual meaning, except for in the sense where it harkens back to Eve of the Daleks. And unless something in this story actually relates back to something that happened in that story, and I shouldn't think it will, because that was pretty self-contained, but it's not impossible, then the dual meaning in this case is kind of negligible, if non-existent. And so I'm kind of with Simon, until or unless we discover that there's more of a reason for this to be called Power of the Doctor than simply this is a story about how powerful the Doctor is, whatever, then I'm kind of maybe a 5-2.
So my assumption is it's the power of regeneration would be the dual meaning, because regeneration is a power. John, unmute thyself.
Do you mean then you've got to give it a score though, Matt? But do you mean power as in like a superhero power? The Doctor's superhero power is the power to regenerate.
Yeah, or just the act of regeneration is a power, isn't it? Yeah. So that's what I read of it. That the
well, it's
Doctor
a capability more than a power, right? But see what I mean? It's kind of woolly.
It could be conceived as being a power. But,
yeah. But
so
do you know
I think
what I mean? It's
I think
also
with something like the word power, then the dual meaning will only reveal itself throughout the. I suspect with the script, as I'm imagining it will be, at some point the power of the Doctor will be referred to in the script in some way or shape or form.
Like Name of the Doctor in Name of the Doctor, yeah.
I'm going to score it after John scores it.
Oh, okay.
John scores it 6. It's like Sooty.
And for the benefit of anybody who's just listening and not watching, that he held up 3 fingers on each hand.
Yes. John, you are allowed to speak.
Yeah.
Why, thank you. That's generous. Yeah. The thing is, it's celebrating the part of the show as much as anything, because it's celebrating the centenary of the BBC. So it's just the power of the Doctor. I suspect it's going to be something similar to what we saw, which Russell did, which is harking back to the effect the Doctor has on their companions. So that's my kind of banking on where it comes from. But it is quite a blandish title. It's kind of a shame there isn't a kind of power of 2 somewhere in the Chibnall era, because then you've got the power of 3, the power of 2, and the power of the Doctor.
Yeah. I got to say, that is kind of the conversation I think we need to have. The fact that the centenary special is an extra episode. And I think there are ramifications to do with that, which are important in discussing what we expect from the episode. So maybe we'll come back to that later.
So let's start, he says, hosting. let's start. Okay, so you're
going to give the score?
Oh, no, because it's a ridiculous thing to score a title.
That's why we're doing it, because it's fun.
I didn't agree to it, and I'm hosting. I mean, it is a bland title, so I agree that it is potentially a bland title. But then, Time of the Doctor is probably the most generic title there's ever been. You might as well call it Planet of Time, or I don't know, Evil of the Daleks, or I don't know. It's just lots of Doctor Who titles are bland. Sometimes the episodes themselves are bland, but I don't know. It depends on what happens in the story. I think Power has enough ambiguity, has enough shiftiness to make for an interesting episode if they run with it. At least Power is like an attribute. I mean, Time time isn't really an attribute. So I think Time of the Doctor, even though
yes,
time is, he spends a lot of time dying in Time of the Doctor.
No. Time of the Doctor was A, the end of the Doctor trilogy, and B, it referred to the fact that time was up for the Doctor, the end of all his regenerations. So there's a very specific meaning to that title.
It's still a bland title, though. And
by that reckoning, then Planet of Evil is probably the blandest.
Yeah. Or what's the insect one that Russell T Davies did?
Planet of the Dead.
Planet of the Dead. That's pretty bland.
Mm.
I mean, we haven't got Talons of Weng Chiang or Pyramids of Maya anyway. Okay, I'll give it a 6. But it might go up, it might go down when the episode is broadcast.
It's worth pointing out before we move on from the title that I believe the reason, because at the end of, if you remember, at the end of, was it Eve of the Daleks was the last one of the specials, and then at the end there was the Next Time trailer and it said Next Time Legend of the Sea Devils, and they gave the title then. But at the end of Legend of the Sea Devils they didn't give the title for this, and people are saying, oh, why didn't we have the title back then? They could have just told us the title back then. Power of the Doctor is not spoilery. They should have just told the title ages ago. Apparently they didn't have a title back then, so they couldn't put the title on at the end of Legend of the Sea Devils because they hadn't decided what it was going to be yet. And so they've apparently decided on the title fairly late in the day, so it seems.
So it's obviously gone through like hardcore focus groups, which is interesting.
Well, no, I wonder if
they boiled it down.
Yeah, well, I wonder if the reason was they kind of, because giving something a title, unless there's a title that screams out, giving something a title, especially in a program that's been running as long as Doctor Who has, it's not the easiest thing to try and boil down the essence of a story into 5 or 6 words or something. And so I guess they probably had maybe 3 or 4 different options, and they probably sort of sat with each option for a few weeks to see how it settled in. And I'm guessing this is the one that settled in the best.
Yeah, the return to Ravsgorav Kolos was rejected early on as being overly complicated. Obviously the most exciting thing is the return of Ace and Tegan. Is that obvious? Should that be the most exciting thing? Should we be
for old school fans?
I'm most excited about the return of Ace and Tegan. That's what's driving me to watch this. Is that a good thing? Is that a good thing for the last Jodie Whittaker story? Should that be my main reason to watch this?
Well, this is where we have to have a conversation about this being an extra episode then. Okay. Because presumably at the point at which Chris Chibnall sat down to write Flux, plus the 2 specials that would follow Flux, and one of which would be the regeneration, a bit like when Stephen Moffat wrote the second half of Series 7 with 2 episodes afterwards, which would be 2 specials culminating in the regeneration. And then Chris Chibnall was asked to add a third. And when he was asked to add a third, that episode was going to be 6 months after where the regeneration was originally going to take place. So not only was he adding an extra episode, but it was going to be an extra episode that was going to be months later, not just a few weeks later, where he could have built something into the storyline that would carry one episode to the other. Because I think, a month maybe is about as much time as you could probably leave a casual audience hanging over a story point. But something like 6 months is too long. So he had to add Legend of the Sea Devils quite late in the day, and then he had to re-engineer the regeneration story to take into account the fact that the BBC had asked for a story that fitted the theme of the centenary. And to fit the theme of the centenary, what he's chosen to do, it seems to me, is he's chosen to bring in lots of characters from 20th century Doctor Who, as kind of by way of demonstration that Doctor Who, like the BBC, has been around over the course of a century, or from the last century into this, rather than just in the last few years. So whatever the story in Power of the Doctor is, whatever the premise of the story, I think Ace and Tegan and whoever else, and we'll talk about this in a minute, are additions that came in after the fact.
Is this something you know, or you've conjectured based on the idea of it being retooled for the centenary?
Well, both, bit of both.
Because I don't think it sounds likely that he finds out he has to tie it in with the centenary and then decides to bring back old companions. because it sounds well. So I'm going to ask you: is this some insider information? Because sometimes you have like insider gossip.
Oh, I don't have
and
insider
you reveal
gossip
it to us later, but you frame it as conjecture in the podcast, and then we spend half an hour arguing about whether there is a connection between Centenary. Because I think just having a special episode of Doctor Who is enough for it to be a Centenary. I don't think he needs to tie it in with the idea of Centenary. I think we were calling it the Centenary special because we didn't have a title for it. Basically, it's just been time slotted as part of the Centenary.
No, it's
so
not.
Ace and Tegan. Oh, Ace and Tegan. It seems to me from reading the bits of the magazine that I have read that they were asked fairly early on, before he'd written it, whether they could be in it, because he was asking what they wanted from their character and what they wanted to do, and he was talking to them quite a long time before filming so he could prepare for their entry. It's not like they were slotted in. They're not a cameo. They're a central part of this story.
I'm not saying it was last minute rewrites.
Right.
But I am saying
they were in it. They were always going to be in the regeneration special.
No.
Okay.
There was going to be at some point there was going to be an episode that went out at Easter in which the regeneration would have happened. But before Chris Chibnall wrote that episode, the BBC, before he wrote Series 13, the BBC said, add an extra episode on the end so that we can have a Centenary episode. Okay. And so whatever Chris Chibnall had been thinking about for the episode at Easter, that episode got moved to the Centenary. Legend of the Sea Devils got added at Easter, and the episode that was going to be the regeneration was retooled to be part of the Centenary, and it was commissioned for the Centenary, so it will include elements that are to do with the fact that the BBC is 100 years old. I mean, it might not necessarily say the BBC is 100 years old during the episode, but it has been retooled as a Centenary BBC special, part of the Centenary specials, part of the Centenary celebrations.
So I still
think of it like
I still think that even if this had been written for Easter, it would still have, Ace and Tegan in it.
I don't think so. I think bringing back.
I don't see how they connect to the Centenary of the BBC. But let's talk to other people. Simon, are you excited about Ace and Tegan coming back to Doctor Who?
I'm intrigued. Yes. Yeah, two of my favourite characters. And any excuse to get them back is great. I hope the story lives up to that. And I kind of see how that fits in the Centenary. It's looking to the past. It's not specifically a Centenary thing to do, though, is it? I mean, that's looking at the past of the show as opposed to the past of the BBC.
Yeah.
So,
but the past of the show is tied to the past of the BBC. I mean, that's kind of the point.
Bringing back the Daleks is obviously, that would be a Centenary special, even though they've been back since.
Yeah, they're current.
They're the actual iconic thing. They're the things that would appear on, if there was a documentary about the history of the BBC. Tegan wouldn't appear in that documentary, but
no, but both I would say Tegan and Ace are, if you're going to bring back two of the strongest female characters, which is in line with us having our first female Doctor, then they're probably the two characters, or at least actors who are in a position to return.
Yeah, what beyond maybe a video link to William Russell potentially,
or Katie Manning.
Well, okay. So before we get onto that, so we go to John. John, are you excited about Tegan and Ace coming back?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean Ace, because I'm a huge fan of McCoy era. When we get to that Doctor special, I'm just going to be frankly very happy, smiley, and etc. So yeah, Ace coming back is brilliant because you've seen her come back in that DVD trailer, and that's it. And I think it ties into that a little.
Yeah.
Although I'm just watching JR's face here to see if I can play poker on him on this. So to speak.
I don't know much. I've read a couple of things, like either on Twitter or Gallifrey Base or somewhere, and I've just said one of them. So
Yeah.
The DVD or Blu-ray trailer was picking up on things that Russell T Davies had already said in the Sarah Jane Adventures, because Russell T Davies did this useful sort of rundown of where the companions were, just to kind of either throw the spanner in the works or gift us with a load of kind of potential fan fiction. And Mark of this podcast made a really great suggestion that all of these Blu-ray trailers could potentially be leading into this final episode. So others coming back. I thought it likely that Katie Manning would come back and others would come back.
Katie Manning.
I think that's less. Go on.
Oh, Katie Manning tweeted.
Right.
She tweeted at the time when Ace and Tegan were filming their bits, presumably. Katie Manning tweeted, "Oh, just been filming something that I can't talk about. You'll find out in the due course." And of course, Katie Manning's not really a working actor anymore, except for in Big Finish, and she's been a bit ill.
Neither Janet Fielding.
No, exactly. No. Well, that's my point, John. My point is they're not really working actors anymore. So if they're going to come back for anything, and particularly given the timing, Katie Manning was talking about doing something for the Doctor Who special.
So the cover story that both Janet Fielding and Sophie Aldred used was they were filming things for the Blu-ray. Reading their little bits in DWM, I'm less convinced that other companions are going to come back, because I was convinced that they wouldn't be the only ones. I'm sort of less convinced now, or at least I'm less convinced that any companion will have a substantial role in this. Maybe a sort of on a TV somewhere in a sort of a first Doctor from the Three Doctors styley.
That would be my guess. These are the two main ones, and there'll be cameos from others.
Presumably the Earthbound ones as well. So we can probably let's play a game, folks. Simon, can you name the companions who are known to be on Earth at the moment and who are still alive? The actors are still alive.
Well, not Ace. Ace didn't end up on Earth at the end of her time in Doctor Who.
We don't really know. There's been about 15 different endings to Ace, and I think we're dealing with the Russell T Davies ending, aren't we?
I can't think of any more being put on the spot, because Lilo is on Gallifrey.
Yeah, Ian Chesterton's on Earth.
Okay. But I think they're making a point of having female companions.
Oh, okay.
In the main roles, but maybe they could potentially have cameos from other people. That's the other thing. Do you want me to bring it up now?
It's like your dinner. Okay, go on.
Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann, potentially some or all of those have got cameos. They're not playing the Doctor. They're playing other characters, but just in very small cameos.
Wow! And where did you hear this? Is this a Gallifrey base thing?
I believe, yeah.
Okay.
This sounds very. To Zagreus.
Sorry?
He was listening to Zagreus again.
That's John's input. John has occasional pithy inputs when his microphone allows.
I think these rumours originated on Reddit.
They do sound like the rumours we got endlessly before Day of the Doctor, and they were sort of half correct that we did kind of see bits of earlier Doctors.
But also these rumours kind of tend to come from the same places generally as rumours such as Series 12 will feature a regeneration cycle prior to the William Hartnell Doctor happened, and all sorts of other things like that have turned out to be true. So, the thing about these rumours is John Barrowman's going to turn up in Fugitive of the Doctor was a rumour prior to that episode. Some of these rumours turn out to be right. Some of them don't turn out to be right.
Wasn't there a rumour that Coldplay was going to be involved in this?
Oh, no, that wasn't a rumour. That was more of some idiot speculation on Twitter or something.
Okay. See, this is my problem, because some things on social media are idiot speculation when they get disproved, and some are potential solid rumours, and I mean, yeah. So if Stephen Moffat is saying one of these things, then I can sort of, or if Chris Chibnall starts spreading rumours, then I can start.
Personal opinion, then, I think the idea of Davison through McGann, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be all four of them or maybe any three of them. I think that's fairly solid. And I think the Katie Manning one, I think, is nailed on, given the timing of the tweet. And that was her, not a rumour. That was her tweeting that.
So, Simon, does this sound like it's going to be ridiculously overstuffed to you? Or is that a leading question?
I suppose the thing is this serving the story, or is it literally tagged on? You know, are these just little flourishes to make it seem like a celebration or something like that? I don't know. I would like to think that it's in with the story, that it ties in with what's happening. I mean, I'm assuming that some stage I'm going to be asked whether I'm feeling enthusiastic about it. And
are you feeling enthusiastic about it?
Not yet, no, because it feels like it's been such a fragmented era of Doctor Who, both on a transmission level but also on a drama level, that there's been so many ups and downs, and particularly with the last episode being such a weak one, that a climax has to be earned.
Yeah.
Just ask a doctor.
It feels a little like it feels a little like the Chibnall era started.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit like it so tried to do something big in the middle, and it looks a little like COVID kind of hobbled it towards the end. So they managed to get something fairly coherent out with Flux, which had moments of real greatness. But now it's kind of staggering towards the end. But then I think the RTD era did a similar thing. I think the 3 RTD specials that Tennant ended on. I mean, Planet of the Dead feels now a little bit like Legend of the Sea Devils does to me. That it's just sort of underwhelming, and I'll probably forget about it.
I think the problem you've got here is at the end of Tennant, you had Waters of Mars and the End of Time relatively close together, so it felt like it was building to a climax. But because of where the centenary fell, and because it's just coincidence that the sort of Chibnall era was due to finish at this time, but because they've asked for this extra special and it's 6 months after the end of the previous episode, it really does kind of feel like this is just like this little appendix after the era should have ended already. It's weird,
when was
isn't
Legend
it?
of the Sea Devils broadcast? Hang on.
Like early April or late March? It was Easter, wasn't it? I can't remember when Easter fell. So
17th April.
Have we got a running time for this episode yet?
So it's exactly 6 months, give or take a single day by the sound of it.
Running time.
A running time of 6 months.
Oh, 90 minutes is the running
about
time.
Right.
Maybe Chibnall's pushed the boat out. Maybe he can get all these things in effectively. This is like Chibnall's Satan Tango.
If it was 17th of April, that is exactly 6 months and 1 day before the actual centenary of the BBC, which is Tuesday the 18th of October, which indicates that the Doctor Who special, will probably go out on Sunday the 16th, which is 6 months minus 1 day. So 6 months gap. 90 minutes is the running time of the episode, unless, and that's obviously give or take a couple of minutes because they never fall exactly 90 minutes dead, but unless it's 6 minutes short of the 90, it will be the longest ever broadcast episode of Doctor Who, bar the 5 Doctors.
Okay, I mean, that makes me a little bit more interested because it means that the episode can operate on its own terms. So much like Day of the Doctor, which you can watch completely separate from the rest of the timeline of the series, it will build its own climax. So that's fine. That fills me with a little bit more.
Build your own climax.
Yes.
It's also an hour and a half. It is a traditional film length. So I think sometimes when they do a 70-minute special, it feels like either an overstuffed 45-minute episode or it feels like an understuffed film. Whereas an hour and a half does feel like a natural length for a story to be told. Whether that's right or I mean, it breaks up into 3 half-hour acts basically. So John, do you think the timeless children are going to be coming back into this episode?
I would think that, given Chris Chibnall's kind of raison d'etre seems to be anti-dramatic, okay. I think that he'd kind of leave that arc with the anti-climax it ended on in Flux. It's I think if he doesn't go for it, then social media will go mad, obviously, because social media goes mad over anything.
Yeah.
But I think that I don't think there's enough room for that timeless children thing, and we haven't heard anything about Joe Martin coming back anyway either.
So that would be the one bit that I'd be disgruntled about. So if they don't bring the timeless children in, I think it was anticlimactic, but for a reason, and for once I thought that was one of the more interesting things about Flux, was the fact that it turned out not to be about discovering something. It turned out to be the realization that you didn't need to discover something. But Joe Martin's still a really interesting, version of the Doctor, and I really liked the dynamic with Jodie Whittaker. And actually, I felt that Jodie Whittaker and Joe Martin's relationship was more interesting than her relationship with the Master. So I'm kind of Sacha Dhawan. I'm not that thrilled that he's coming back. I quite liked him, but I don't think the bits of Doctor Who magazine I've read were talking about the great sort of dynamic that Jodie Whittaker and Sacha Dhawan have, and her Doctor with her Master, and it's every Doctor has his or her Master, but it doesn't really feel like that to me. It feels like that Joe Martin has had that kind of, not the role sort of narratively speaking, but kind of iconically speaking, the two of them had more of a because they were the opposite ends of the Doctor spectrum. One is a sort of a passive, naive, kind of pacifist.
That's an interesting point. If they'd made Joe Martin somebody who was, acting opposed to our Doctor, that would have been a really interesting. I mean, I know we're back to the Valeyard sort of levels of things. I'm not talking about her being evil or anything like that. Just that she would have had a different mission, and therefore they could have been pulling in different directions, which would have kind of negated the Master's presence completely in some respects.
I think that's also, kind of. Go on.
It's also, I mean, we all wrote for Seasons of War, I think. Yes. So yes. We know that the War Doctor, the idea of the War Doctor is an interesting one, because he's not evil. He's just, like the Doctor, only ruthless. He has the same goals as the Doctor, but he doesn't stop at killing, allowing people to die. He just like steamrollers through problems. And that made him quite an interesting version of the Doctor, who wasn't really shown in Day of the Doctor, because in Day of the Doctor we see his redemption. We see him slowly becoming more and more Doctorish and learning to be the Doctor. Whereas maybe the Joe Martin Doctor kind of had the potential to be the War Doctor in full throat.
But I think that's kind of the problem that Stephen Moffat found. I think he probably wanted to write the War Doctor as sort of an antagonist, as opposed to just a slight variation on a protagonist. But I think he found you can't. I think that was his discovery. And I think that's also Chris Chibnall's discovery in Fugitive of the Doctor. Joe Martin only really turns into the alternative version of the Doctor for a few minutes at the end of that episode. And people remember when that episode came out, people were saying how strong a character she was. She wasn't a strong character. She was a character distilled into sort of 6.5 minutes of screen time. That's what she was. And that's why sort of everything that she did so much more quickly and so much more directly than Jodie Whittaker had been doing. But I think the consequence of that is her entire character is played out in those 6.5 or whatever number of minutes it is. And I don't think there's really that much more of a character necessarily to tell. And I think whatever there was left of her character to tell, the plan was probably to show that in Flux. And I think that was nobbled by COVID. And I get the impression that if that had been, its time has passed and COVID nobbled it. And so we're not going to get it. Okay. That's my feeling.
And Daleks and Cybermen, are we not excited about seeing Daleks and Cybermen returning to Doctor Who on a special episode?
I think Daleks is just a cameo, and Cybermen is going to be judging by what's in Doctor Who magazine, Cybermen is going to be the end of the Cybermen end of the story that was told in The Timeless Children. So actually, I am intrigued to see what they do with the Cybermen, because I think that's going to be a continuation of an ongoing storyline rather than just they're here to be Cybermen and move on. So I think that's going to be a stronger part of the story.
But we think the Master is the main antagonist of this.
Yeah, but with those Cybermen, so
Yeah.
that works perfectly, because that's the continuation of his storyline as well, when we last saw him too.
Okay.
So are they regenerating Cybermen, and is that what's going to tie in with the power of the Doctor, if the power is regeneration?
Well, that's an interesting thought.
Okay. And finally, how do we think she's going to regenerate? Who do you think she's going to regenerate into? What form is it going to take? We haven't seen any, so they haven't tapped her regeneration. So it takes place on a very, very locked down location, or, I mean, the rumours are it doesn't take place in the TARDIS, it takes place somewhere else. JR thinks it's going to take place underwater.
No, there was people talking about it, but I don't think that's the case, because I think that's a ridiculous idea. Plus, they've put out art this week, haven't they? And the art seems to indicate it's going to be a regular regeneration. And yeah, okay, that art could be a red herring, but I don't get the impression that art's been put out as a red herring. I think it's going to be a TARDIS regeneration, or locked set, but a controllable environment regeneration.
Okay, and who is she going to regenerate into?
David Tennant.
Everybody thinks David Tennant.
Yeah. Do you think different?
I don't know. It's not going to be Ncuti Gatwa, so I know that for certain, because they wouldn't have her regenerate into Ncuti Gatwa unless they did something very, very kind of stretched and open Russell T Davies's first special with, I don't know, three centuries earlier or something like that. So I don't think it's going to be Ncuti Gatwa. I wonder if we don't see the other end of the regeneration. I guess that way you don't get the twist at the end. You don't get a sort of a feeder into Russell T Davies, because I guess the end, I'm talking myself around the other way, the end of sort of special episodes are kind of a promo for the next episode in a way. So I'm not sure if they would then miss out on this kind of extra bit.
And for that reason, I don't think there's a chance in hell that you won't see David Tennant at the end of this.
So, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she regenerates into David Tennant. So you can have the regeneration scene cut away, and then you can have a Russell T Davies written scene somewhere else, and that's the twist. That you think you're about to see the new Doctor running around, but actually that's David Tennant. So it doesn't necessarily. I'm coming around the other way. I don't think we'll see the regeneration into David Tennant, because it would mean David Tennant dressed in Jodie Whittaker's clothes. And I genuinely think, and this might be, I know this is regressive of me, but I think that's there's something stranger about that idea than Jodie Whittaker dressed in Peter Capaldi's suit.
I think it sends out a message to all the J.K. Rowlings of the world.
Yeah, but I'm just not sure if that's an image we're going to end up with.
Oh, I don't know.
You know, I think we won't see the regeneration at the end of the episode, but then the credits will roll, and then at the end of the credits, we'll get a little Easter egg at the end, and we see him appear.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. That you don't see the end, you don't see the actual transformation, but you do get to see David Tennant at some point at the end, or we get to see David Tennant during the episode at some point.
Now, two things.
Yes.
One, there's going to be something in the David Tennant storyline that makes it about the fact that she's regenerated into David Tennant, and then somehow he has to move the regeneration on to Ncuti Gatwa. And in order to do a storyline where it's about the fact that she regenerated into David Tennant, you have to see her regenerate into David Tennant. So I don't think they're not going to do it for that.
Hang on. So is that something you know, that at some point in the David Tennant special, there's going to be a point made that he's the next incarnation?
Well, that's what Russell T Davies has talked about.
Russell T Davies has said this isn't the. I can't remember what he said, but he didn't make that clear. He said
no,
this is something different, he said.
Oh, yes, but in order for it to be something different, that has to be a part of the reason why it's happening on screen. And in order for that to be a part of why it's happening on screen, we have to see that it's something different. You can't just cut and say, here's a story that can take place anywhere and anywhen. For the viewer's sake, you have to say, this is the story that's taking place next. And what's the reason for that? Because if you just cut between one and the other and say, what's the reason for that? They'll say, well, I don't know. What difference does it make?
Okay, so I disagree with that. I think they can just cut and then explain it as, I know it's not an alternate dimension, but I think they can explain this as, I think it'd be more interesting if they explain it not as he's the next Doctor in the cycle, but he's something different. There's something different going on.
Well, so and also,
I think a break in that continuity kind of works.
But then also the other thing was, every time Stephen Moffat had anything to do with the regeneration, everybody talked for months and months about how, because it was Stephen Moffat, there was obviously going to be something different about this regeneration. And then we got there and it was exactly the same as they'd always been, because the showrunners don't mess with that. That's a huge part of the program that the audience is tuned in to see. However many millions of people are tuning in to Power of the Doctor, they're tuning in to see her regenerate into somebody else. And the BBC and Chris Chibnall aren't stupid enough to get to the end of 90 minutes and say, you're not getting it, we're getting it.
So I think my counter to that would be, if it was anybody other than David Tennant, that would be the case. But I think she regenerates, the camera cuts away, then as Simon suggests, there's another scene and David Tennant is involved. I think that would be a big enough payoff at the end, because it's David Tennant. He's so recognizable as the Doctor that it's not like, I don't know, it's not going to be like other regenerations. The twist is it's David Tennant, but you don't necessarily need to see that bit of the regeneration. But who knows? It's been done on a sealed set. Does anybody else have any ideas about, or any speculation? John, you've been very quiet.
With this mute button on.
You think he's going to regenerate into Patrick Troughton? You held up,
absolutely,
you held up
yes.
2 fingers.
No, a double William Hartnell. You're going to get Bradley and Hartnell together for the first time. No, I think the thing with the end of the episode is Russell T Davies is always a very savvy man about television. He doesn't want to give anyone who's left the chance to jump off now. He wants to give people the maximum opportunity to get interested. So there will be, I think, some kind of hook to it. I don't know if it'll be a direct hook from Jodie to David Tennant, but at least the next time trailer with some images from the next specials, because we know some of them have been filmed by now. Yeah. So yeah, there will be kind of reasons, I think, to get excited right at the end. But I think it might just be a fade to black regeneration. So because I'm not entirely sure we'll get that tradition of where do you want this left? Okay, I'll write it to leave it to this point, which has happened from Russell to Stephen and from Stephen to Chris here. So yeah, I think there will be continuity to it, certainly, at least.
Okay, so let's take a vote. So there are 2 options potentially: a fade to black regeneration.
Do you want me to just tell you something that's been speculated before you say there are 2 options?
Is this speculating, or is this
speculation?
One of your
No. This is speculation.
Chris Chibnall, where he's told you the entire storyline, and you're kind of like pretending it's speculation?
No, this is speculation on account of the fact that it's been said that there will be previous Doctors from the 20th century turning up at some point during this episode, and people have speculated that the regeneration will be Jodie Whittaker regenerating into Paul McGann, and then Paul McGann regenerating into Sylvester McCoy, then Colin Baker, then Peter Davison, then Ncuti Gatwa, then David Tennant, and then the episode ends. Or, some different variation on that configuration of Doctors. In other words, the regeneration goes wrong, she starts going backwards, then she goes forwards, and she ends up settling on something in the middle.
Okay. I mean, that sounds awful.
With all things, it depends. With all things, it probably does sound awful, but they could do it really well if it was a thing that they were doing.
I'm just thinking Colin Baker and Jodie Whittaker's outfit now.
Potentially, yeah, you just see the faces or something, maybe.
No. If they're going to do it, I want them to do it properly. I want to see the full body as it.
Or maybe it could be like The End of Time, where each of the Doctors gets 2 or 3 minutes in an extended 15-minute regeneration sequence at the end. So she regenerates into Peter Davison, who has a mini adventure.
I mean, let's call this the Curse of Fatal Death ending proposition. Okay, so we've got the Fade to Black regeneration, we've got the Curse of Fatal Death regeneration, or straight to Tennant. Well, there's 4 of us, so this is ridiculous. But okay, who votes for the straight to Tennant?
Well, clearly I'm straight to Tennant.
Who votes for the Fade to Black? Oh, sorry, Simon.
Yeah, straight to Tennant, but I think falls in the water, and then the credits roll, and then after the credits are finished, you get a little post-credit scene where David Tennant comes out the water in her clothes.
You're back on the water regeneration.
Yeah, well, yeah, John knows why.
Okay.
I'm saying that.
No.
Has everybody got special like ingrained knowledge?
No, not at all.
A particular fetish.
It's something that John and I were going to write and never got the chance to.
Oh, okay, fine.
Oh, it's not a sex thing.
No.
I thought it was a sex thing. When you said John,
we all assumed it was a sex thing. Okay. Well, I'm voting for fade to black, and then not a next time trailer, but some scene written by Russell T Davies that has a sort of a mysterious appearance from David Tennant, obviously dressed like his doctor. That's my vote. And so we shall see. So is there anything else anybody else wants to say about this tiny amount of information that we have about Power of the Doctor?
Well, I mean, things like Thasmin, is the romance going to actually come to anything? Clearly that's going to, but given the way he's written the last couple of episodes and brought that out to the fore, I don't mean is it going to come to anything. What I mean is it's going to come to a head at some point in this episode. Is it going to be a Yasmin professes her love finally, and the Doctor says, yeah, but I can't do it for reasons I gave in school reunion. Just go back and do your homework. And
I mean, this is a sad thing about Yasmin and the Doctor is, and I can't remember where I read it, probably the bits of DWM that I didn't think I'd read, but I probably have. I vaguely think that he added it because of fan speculation, and they decided it was a good idea. But that means that he added it basically a little bit in Flux and then a fair amount in Legends of the Sea Devils, just in time for it to fizzle out, because it has to fizzle out in this episode. And that's not really it was never going to go anywhere. John, you look like you were about to say something.
You're kind of right. I think it was Mandip Gill was trying to suggest this in a performance that Yaz fancied the Doctor, and whether it was reciprocated or not, but it wasn't necessarily there in the writing. So it's kind of come from an actor rather than the writer. So I don't know how that kind of comments on Chris Triple.
But then it was in the writing, yeah?
Yes.
Afterwards.
Flux and Legend,
yeah. So I think I'd like the hour and a half to be, a romantic sort of exploration of their relationship, with a full and satisfying relationship that then ends on a tragedy. But we've got 4 past Doctors, potentially 4 past companions, Daleks, Cybermen, the Master. Kate Stewart is coming back as well. She's going to be in it. So at some point, John Bishop as well, he's going to be in it. Bradley Walsh is going to be in it. At some point, there's not really going to be room for Yaz and the Doctor to have heartfelt one-on-one conversations somewhere.
You say that. It's 90 minutes. Day of the Doctor was quarter of an hour shorter and fit just as much in and gave substance to a lot of stuff. Introduced the concept of the moment introduce the concept of a doctor that had fallen between our knowledge, introduce the concept of somebody who'd been born just to fight in the Time War, and introduced a sort of physical realization of something we'd only heard about, and told a story about the 10th Doctor shagging Queen Elizabeth I.
Yeah, so I think the Day of the Doctor introduced a load of really good concepts satisfactorily, but I think that's different than telling the story of a relationship in such a way that when it ends tragically you feel something. I think you have to, you have to have a fair number of scenes of just two people in that scene having heartfelt conversations, and I think that's what there may not be room for it to be done satisfactorily. It could be. I think actually the girl in the fireplace did it quite well. So if you're looking for a contrary example, I think that Stephen Moffat and what's her name? What's the name?
Sophia Miles.
Yeah, but the character's name, Madame de Pompadour.
Yeah.
So her relationship with the Doctor, that kind of built up a fairly satisfying relationship that you felt the tragedy at the end.
And they don't forget, they don't need to have heartfelt conversations. They just need to show how much they care, and they can do that in deeds rather than in words. They don't need to say anything at all to each other. And then at the end, if one of them gets wrested away from the other, just like at the end of Doomsday, I don't think personally I'm going to feel anything from it, because I haven't really felt it during the course of the last 4 years or whatever, but other people have, and other people have felt this relationship very deeply. So this is a storyline for them.
Simon?
Fair enough.
Simon, anything else to say? Do you have an opinion on Yasmin and the Doctor? Or anything else that you're burning to talk about with the Power of the Doctor?
So much of this era feels like things have been tagged on, and the Yaz and the Doctor thing did feel tagged on to me. It seemed to come out, or at least it came across as something which had happened off screen. In that respect, it was kind of believable. It wouldn't necessarily have to play out on screen. Maybe that's a. I don't know really.
I think Power of the Doctor. One thing we will get with Power of the Doctor is we'll get a complete set of Chibnall now, because I think from the moment the Chibnall era started, there was this certainly when I was watching it, and I think when we were talking about it in season 1, we were seeing him introducing new ideas and new styles and a new approach, and we were thinking, well, this might or might not work, but he's got years to do this, because stories are played out over a season and then they're played out over multiple seasons. So there was a constant feeling of, well, maybe this will pay off at the end of next season, or this will pay off and if it doesn't pay off in the season finale, well, maybe they've got threads that's gonna sort of carry on next season. And I've been constantly thinking, well, this might pay off in this episode, or this might all come together. This could still all come together, and it still all could come together, but we're running out of Chibnall now. So I think what Power of the Doctor is going to do for me is it's going to allow me to actually have a view on Chibnall. I've got a view on what I think his writing style is and whether I like it or not. I've got a view on the direction of the stories. I've got a view on sort of the construction of some of the stories, but I don't have a view on his era as a whole yet.
But there's Stephen Moffat, sort of Dr. Falls, Twice Upon a Time, didn't tie up the Stephen Moffat era, really. And that's probably because the Stephen Moffat era, well, Hellbent.
Stephen Moffat had several eras, really.
Well, he sort of did.
He sort of tied up.
But the Stephen Moffat eras each sort of came to an end rather than tying up.
Yes.
The only attempt really he had to tie it up was nixed when Matt Smith left a year early.
Yes, but then Stephen Moffat had the advantage of writing like Stephen Moffat, so he was so witty that you didn't care that some of the loose threads weren't tied up. I think Chris Chibnall writes a bit like Terrance Dicks, which is he writes in a very kind of sort of
straightforward,
plain way. in a very kind of unadulterated way, in a way that it's explaining exactly what's happening. And there's nowhere to hide. If you leave loose ends, or there are ideas that haven't been resolved, or there are things that have disappeared, then that becomes, I think, a lot more obvious with Chibnall than it would be with Moffat or RTD, I think.
But what's he not resolved?
Well, I don't know. I'm still waiting for Graham to have cancer again, or something happening to. I still don't think that they really. I don't believe they had sort of character arcs, because John was saying it's a very anti-dramatic. He's got a very anti-dramatic approach to Doctor Who, and I felt that from the first season, that I was waiting for something dramatic to happen, and then the Battle of Kolos happened, and that was anticlimactic. So there's constant sort of anticlimaxes throughout Chibnall. But at some point you want to see an actual climax to something, an actual end to something. And then, Power of the Doctor might supply that.
If you want to change the subject entirely, I've got something else we can do for a couple of minutes before we go.
Okay.
We have, I think this is John's first. We have a sort of bonus appendix edition of Logan's Look.
Okay.
So, John, do you remember what this is? For anybody who doesn't remember what this is, Adrian Sturrock was he kind of explains it himself. He was watching through Doctor Who with his son, and at some point I became aware of this, and we were talking off the record, and I said, why don't you come on the record? So midway through their journey, they started sending in sort of annotated reports of how they were enjoying their journey through Doctor Who. Adrian Sturrock says, "Hi strangers, it has been nearly a year since Logan and I finished our marathon, which started with an unearthly child back around Easter 2016. Logan was 6 when we started our journey and 11 when we finished it. I thought I would provide some stats on Logan's views of the new series, looking at Doctor's series and stories, and hopefully you find these stats interesting and they perhaps provide some talking points for you. Interestingly, his average scores across Doctors and series were very even, with only small differences between them. So here you go. This is sort of the stats, the sort of favourites and least favourites from Logan's Look's journey through the new series, because it was through the new series basically when he started, or it was before, but the whole of the new series he wrote in and gave us scores and so on. So he's only got complete scores for the new series. Stats by Doctor. The average scores by Doctor's era from lowest to highest were as follows. 12th Doctor, lowest, 77.9 out of 100. 11th Doctor, 78 out of 100. 9th Doctor, 79.1. 10th, 79.2. And 13th, 80.9 out of 100. So there's only actually, just over 3% between all of the Doctors. Adrian says, so there was only 3% between his top and lowest Doctor's eras. Funnily enough, his highest averaging Doctor's era from the classic series, from what he did score, was the 7th Doctor's era, who averaged 79 out of 100, putting him just below the 9th Doctor, so it's about average. Stats by series. Logan's least favourite 3 were: in third least favourite, Series 6, 77.1. Second least, Series 7, 76.4. And then least favourite, Series 8, 76.2. So mid-Moffat was the lowest. But those were still scoring sort of 76, 77. Whereas the highest, third, Series 4, Simon, 79.9. Second highest, Series 12, 81.5, and highest of all, Series 13, Flux, which he scored 85. But, says Adrian, he did score Flux as one single story, so I wonder whether it would still have taken top spot if we had scored each episode individually. And then he goes on and does the favourite actual stories. So he's done the top 5 and the bottom 5, and the bottom 5 are as follows. Equal fifth, End of the World and the Saranga Conundrum, 72 out of 100. and our world. Fourth, The Unquiet Dead, 70. Fourth from bottom. Third from bottom, The Rings of Akaten, 65. Second from bottom, The Angels Take Manhattan, 64. Bottom, Kill the Moon, 49. That's shocking, isn't it? Certainly wrong. I wonder if his age had much to do with it, because if he started the journey when he was 6 and ended the journey when he was 11, then you're probably seeing things a little bit differently towards the end than you did at the start. Anyway, his top 5 stories, again, equal in 5th place, Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, and The Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords scored 94 out of 100, averaged across those episodes. In 4th place, on 96 out of 100, Stolen Earth and Journey's End. In 3rd place, on 99 out of 100, Bad Wolf Parting Other Ways. In 2nd place, on 100 out of 100, The End of Time. And get this, we mentioned it earlier in the episode, in 1st place, and he gave this 101 out of 100, The Time of the Doctor.
Wow. Yeah.
Lots of shocked faces there for anybody listening on audio. So, says Adrian, I think we can safely say that Logan loves the Russell T Davies series finale, which means that he should be seeing some more of his all-time favourite episodes in the not-too-distant future. From my perspective, Adrian adds, my least favourite stories of the new series were 5th least favourite, Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, 4th, Orphan 55, 3rd, again another one we've mentioned, The Battle of Ranskurav Kolos, 2nd least favourite, Fear Her, and least favourite of all, The Rings of Akaten. His favourites being Empty Child in 5th, Bad Wolf Parting the Ways in 4th, Blink in 3rd, Human Nature in 2nd, and The Girl in the Fireplace top. Surprisingly, he said, this is a clean sweep of RTD era stories from me, albeit 4 of them written by Stephen Moffat. No, 3 of them written by Stephen Moffat, sorry, and 1 Paul Cornell. But there are a whole bunch of Moffat era stories just outside my top 5, headlined by World Enough at Time and Time at number 6. My highest Chibnall era story, he says, is Spyfall at 11th. 11th is still quite high. Cheers, he says, Adrian. So there's a little bonus Logan's look with the sort of annotated stats for everybody who was keeping up way back when. Excellent. So back to you, Matt.
Thank you very much. So that's the end of our preview. So we will gather again, having watched the episode. I don't think Ian Martin hasn't watched Legend of the Sea Devils and is refusing. He's stamping his tiny feet, refusing to watch it. So I'm not sure if he's going to be involved.
Do we know why he's refusing to watch it?
Well, it's crap, isn't it? That's the main.
Well, how do you know until you've watched it?
I think maybe he's listened to people, and or maybe he was. I'm not sure. He was a big fan of Flux, perhaps. I'm just guessing, but I wouldn't want to put words in his mouth.
Yeah, all I'm saying is he watched as far as Eve of the Daleks and then stopped before Legend of the Sea Devils, which seems like a strange stopping point to me.
Well, maybe we'll get him on. We'll tell him. We'll tell him we're talking about Paul Auster novels, and actually just introduce it as Legend of the Sea Devils, persuading Ian Martin why he should watch it. Maybe. And you can host that one, JR. So until then, I was Matt. John says John. I was John. Yes.
I was JR.
And I was Simon.
And until next time, we will speak again soon.